Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rational Independent. Today's Reddit rant, we're diving back into ProPublica. They were one of the ones to first make a big splash and talk about Clarence Thomas and his luxury travel funded by a GOP megadonor. And it looks like, they've got another scoop. Let's dig into it. Headline: Clarence Thomas had a child in private school. Harlan Crow paid the tuition. This is a lengthy article, so we're going to stick to the highlights. Setting the stage, going to go ahead and quote the first paragraph. In 2008, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas decided to send his teenage grandnephew to Hidden Lake Academy, a private boarding school in the foothills of northern Georgia. The boy, Mark Martin, was far from home. For the previous decade, he had lived with the justice and his wife in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Thomas had taken legal custody of Martin when he was 6 years old and had recently told an interviewer he was raising him as a son. So I haven't read a ton from ProPublica, but I will give them credit for a few things. They are very specific in their reporting. They are very detailed. They show their work. They uncovered these tuition payments by looking at the bankruptcy filings of the school and identifying that in the ledger there was a payment from an account called Crow Holdings, a wire, and in the ledger of the school, it was referenced as Mark Martin. Mark Martin being the name of the grandnephew that Justice Thomas and his wife adopted. So that's some pretty grade A sleuthing. Props to them. Harlan Crow responded to the reporter, didn't deny any of the factual allegations. So it looks like this is solid journalism uncovering some facts. These are interesting and worth discussing. It looks like, based on what we've gathered, Crow paid for 2 years of the boy's education. Throughout the article, sprinkled in, there's some discussions about whether or not this was appropriate. There's some rehashing of the earlier reporting about the luxury travel that we talked about in an earlier video, etc., etc. From here, I'm going to go ahead and leave the article and I'm going to jump over into my analysis, into my 2 cents, because I think the facts are less important than the framing and the timing. Mainstream narrative reporting relies on many voices that appear to be disparate voices, all beginning to beat the drum in time with each other to give the impression that this issue is the most important issue that we have to talk about right now, and to persuade generally uninformed or low information voters of the right way to think. Because if you just grab a headline or a snippet or a 30-second soundbite as you're walking through a lobby of a CNN talking head or MSNBC, and you know nothing else, that can sway you, that can push your opinion. That's what I mean when I describe narrative reporting. And I have been noticing over the past month or so, maybe even 2 months, an increasing drumbeat across a variety of platforms on this note: corruption within the conservative bench. It seems to be primarily targeted around Justice Clarence Thomas, but I have seen references to other conservative justices. 2 very fruitful questions to ask yourself when it comes to this kind of coordinated action is to ask yourself, who benefits? And also, why now? Timing is important. As they say in comedy, timing is everything. If you have damaging allegations, if you have information, it's clear that the reporting that's been done here has been worked on for a long time. Someone spent a lot of money at ProPublica digging through mountains of information to try and unearth these gems. This is not a leak or a whistleblower. This is diligent investigation. And these kinds of investigations take time and cost money. Once you have this information, though, you can choose when to disclose it. We're talking about actions taken over the course of decades. It's not like this is an emerging thing. It's not like this is a fleeting or one-time unique circumstance. So if you're reporting on corruption that has been alleged corruption that has been ongoing for decades, you get to pick the timing that's most advantageous to you. Why now? The timing of these disclosures and reports seems aimed at affecting the retirement of Justice Thomas and, importantly, his replacement. Since the replacement is confirmed by the president, it means that the timing of the retirement in relation to presidential offices is very important. So here's what I gather from the timing. And by extension, we can look and see who benefits from this reporting. President Biden is a weak president, and in many ways a weaker candidate, because his candidacy by nature is forward-looking. And if you look at where he is now, you cannot look at his mental acuity and say it's going to be better 5 years from now than it is now. That's not how the human brain works. Once you've reached an advanced age and your mental faculties have started to slip, all you have to do is play clips of Joe Biden now and Joe Biden 10 years ago and Joe Biden 20 years ago, President Biden, apologies. And you can see, even as a layman, you can observe slowing of his speech, slurring of his speech, losing his place when presenting a speech, failing at quips, failing at engaging in dynamic crowd environments. These are things that, for better or for worse, were his skills and his strong suits. They are not his strong suits anymore. Why now? Because right now, the Democrats have a slim majority in the Senate, enough to nominate a new appointee to the bench, assuming there's a vacancy. And they have a Democratic president who can confirm that nomination. That process takes time, usually about 6 months, maybe 9 months if there's something contentious going along. So right now, 2023, May of 2023, if you look yourself 9 months in the future, you are looking at the heat of election season. So sometime between right now and about a year from now is your window to replace Justice Thomas with a left-leaning judiciary appointment. I think that's the timing. Seems clear as day. How do you force the retirement of someone across the aisle? This kind of pressure campaign is exactly how you would want to try and eliminate, how you would want to try and force into retirement someone on the opposite side of the bench. One of the challenges with the right is that they claim principle. They claim to hold, and by they, probably me, just for convenience. It is possible to claim to principle. And if you claim to hold the principle, then you yourself can come under pressure when someone says, how can you support this person if they violate your principles? So that's why this kind of pressure campaign works. Because each person who holds to the principles that are under attack, I like Justice Thomas, but if he is corrupt and I value my principles, I can't support someone who's corrupt, so he has to go. And if that works, then the left gets their way and they get to tilt the balance of the Supreme Court back towards the left. My last thought is this. This story shows me, once again, why it is so important to pay attention to the bias of reporting, because a collection of facts can be crafted to tell many different sorts of stories. Let me take this same fact pattern and spin a different story with a different feel. A childless couple found out that one of their family members was going to go to prison for drug offenses, leaving his 6-year-old son to go into the foster system. Rather than allow that to happen, this couple elected to bring that child into their home and do their best to give him every opportunity to succeed in life. The best of education, of housing, friendships, networking, etc. This 6-year-old boy came into their home and was raised as a son. As the boy grew, the family adapted to the changing educational demands of the boy and the parents' demanding careers. And in spite of many efforts to try and line up schedules between their careers and the high-quality public school system in Virginia, eventually they decided that the best place for the boy would be in private school, and even for a time in a boarding school, something to provide the necessary structure and support to give the boy everything that he needed. Boarding schools are tremendously expensive and seem to be outside the reach of this family. A family friend volunteered to cover the tuition costs for this boy. Their contribution towards supporting this young man who had come from such a difficult background. Over the years, the boy eventually finished high school, graduated, and is now thriving as an adult, as a working professional with a family of his own. What a wonderful thing. It's the same fact pattern, but one is complimentary and off the cuff. You could put in a lot more flowery language and other details and really shine it up. And the other tries to be as disparaging as possible. So when reporters dig up fact, they get to choose how to present those facts. If they don't disclose their biases, you can be left to draw the wrong conclusion. I will close with this thought. I personally don't see Justice Thomas as a corrupt member of the judiciary. One of the reasons for that is because when I look at the pattern of his rulings, they are in line with his established principles. If I see a public servant, an appointee, or an elected official who goes against his established principles, then I look for corruption. But just because you have wealth in your circles does not necessarily mean you are corrupt. There's the potential for corruption. We're all human beings, but there needs to be evidence of it as well. And evidence of wealth is not evidence of corruption. That's my Reddit rant for today. We'll see where this goes. Good luck out there.